Welcome to Tabo Eminent channel. The first major wagon train to the Northwest departs from Elm Grove, Missouri, on the Oregon Trail. Although U.S. sovereignty over the Oregon Territory was not clearly established until 1846, American fur trappers and missionary groups had been living in the region for decades, to say nothing of the Native Americans who had settled the land centuries earlier. Dozens of books and lectures proclaimed Oregon's agricultural potential, piquing the interest of white American farmers. The first overland migrants to Oregon, intending primarily to farm, came in 1841 when a small band of 70 pioneers left Independence, Missouri. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel. They followed a route blazed by fur traders, which took them west along the Platte River through the Rocky Mountains via the Easy South Pass in Wyoming and then northwest to the Columbia River. In the years to come, pioneers came to call the route the Oregon Trail. In 1842, a slightly larger group of 100 pioneers made the 2,000-mile journey to Oregon. The next year, however, the number of emigrants skyrocketed to 1,000. The sudden increase was a product of a severe depression in the Midwest combined with a flood of propaganda from fur traders, missionaries, and government officials extolling the virtues of the land. Farmers dissatisfied with their prospects in Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee, hoped to find better lives in the supposed paradise of Oregon. On this day in 1843, some 1,000 men, women, and children climbed aboard their wagons and steered their horses west out of the small town of Elm Grove, Missouri. The train comprised more than 100 wagons with a herd of 5,000 oxen and cattle trailing behind. Dr. Elijah White, a Presbyterian missionary who had made the trip the year before, served as a guide. The first section of the Oregon Trail ran through the relatively flat country of the Great Plains. Obstacles were few, though the river crossings could be dangerous for wagons. As they traversed through Native American territories, the danger of attacks was a small but genuine risk. To be on the safe side, the pioneers drew their wagons into a circle at night to create a makeshift stockade. If they feared Native Americans might raid their livestock, the Plains tribes valued the horses, though generally ignored the oxen. They would drive the animals into the enclosure. The pioneers quickly learned that they were more likely to be injured or killed by a host of other causes. Obstacles included accidental discharge of firearms, falling off mules or horses, drowning in river crossings, and disease. After entering the mountains, the trail also became much more difficult, with steep ascents and descents over rocky terrain. The pioneers risked injury from overturned and runaway wagons. Yet, as with the 1,000-person party that made the journey in 1843, the vast majority of pioneers on the trail survived to reach their destination in the fertile, well-watered land of western Oregon. The migration of 1844 was smaller than that of the previous season, but in 1845 it jumped to nearly 3,000. Thereafter, migration on the Oregon Trail was an annual event, although the practice of traveling in giant convoys of wagons gave way to many smaller bands of 1 or 2 dozen wagons. The trail was heavily traveled until 1884, when the Union Pacific constructed a railway along the route. In the spring of 1843, a stirring sense of adventure and hope swept across the American frontier. Nearly 1,000 men, women, and children packed their lives into wooden wagons and set out from Independence, Missouri, bound for the fertile lands of the Oregon country. This group, later known as the Great Emigration, marked the first large-scale migration of settlers along what would become the famed Oregon Trail. For these pioneers, the journey promised freedom, opportunity, and the chance to claim land in the distant West, a dream that outweighed the dangers of the 2,000-mile trek. The caravan stretched for miles, a long procession of oxen-drawn wagons creaking slowly over the plains. Days were grueling, filled with dust, scorching heat, and the endless rhythm of walking beside heavy wagons. At night, families huddled by fires, mending clothes, cooking simple meals, and telling stories to lift their spirits. Children played among the sagebrush, while parents fretted over swollen rivers and the ominous silhouettes of the Rocky Mountains ahead. Disease, injury, and fatigue tested the endurance of even the strongest. But the spirit of the group, bound together by purpose and shared struggle, kept them moving forward. Among them was Marcus Whitman, a missionary and physician who had previously traveled to Oregon and now offered guidance to the weary travelers. His knowledge of the terrain and the Native American tribes they would encounter proved invaluable. Though hardships were many, broken wagons, food shortages, and the ever-present threat of illness, the emigrants pressed on with astonishing resolve. When they finally reached the lush Willamette Valley in Oregon months later, the weary pioneers saw before them the land they had dreamed of, green, fertile, and full of promise. Their journey not only transformed their lives but also changed the course of American history. The success of the Great Emigration proved that families, not just fur trappers or single men, could make the journey west, igniting a wave of westward migration that would shape the destiny of a growing nation. The morning sun rose over the Missouri River as the final wagons rolled out of independence in May of 1843. The air buzzed with tension and excitement. Children clung to mothers' skirts, oxen snorted under their yokes, and fathers checked wagon wheels one last time. Among the emigrants were farmers, blacksmiths, schoolteachers, and even former soldiers, ordinary people seeking a better life beyond the horizon. They had sold their homes, gathered supplies, and said tearful goodbyes to family members they might never see again. Ahead lay a journey across mountains, deserts, and rivers, and no one knew who would survive to see Oregon. The first weeks across the prairie were deceptively peaceful. The land was flat and green, dotted with wildflowers and herds of buffalo in the distance. Spirits were high, but soon, reality began to bite. Rain turned the trail to mud. Rivers like the Platte and Snake became obstacles that required dangerous crossings, where wagons could tip and sweep away people and supplies. Tempers flared, and some families even turned back, overwhelmed by the difficulty of the road. Yet most pressed on, driven by hope and a growing bond with those around them. The wagon train became a moving community, where strangers became friends and survival depended on cooperation. As the terrain changed, so did the risks. By midsummer, the travelers reached the rugged Blue Mountains. The trail narrowed, and wagons had to be lowered down steep slopes with ropes. Food began to run low, and hunting became a lifeline. Many pioneers fell ill. Cholera, dysentery, and fever took a heavy toll. Graves began to appear along the trail, marked with simple wooden crosses and the names of loved ones lost. Still, the wagons rolled on. When at last the Willamette Valley came into view in the fall, the emotion was overwhelming. Tears flowed freely. The long journey, full of danger and sorrow, had finally brought them to a land of green hills, mild climate, and rich soil. For many, it was more than a destination. It was the rebirth of a life once burdened by poverty or lack of opportunity. They began to build homes, plant crops, and form towns. The Great Emigration of 1843 became not just a milestone in westward expansion, but a living symbol of American determination, sacrifice, and the enduring power of hope.